All right, everyone, welcome to our last lesson in our Earth's surface unit. Today we're talking about weathering and erosion. Now, I have to give you guys a little disclaimer. I used to teach this lesson to fifth graders, and so the way that I know how to teach these terms is probably a little elementary for you eighth graders, so it might seem a little bit silly. Y'all bear with me, okay? I know that it'll seem silly, and y'all are too old for this. I get it, but hang with me. I promise, as silly as this is, it works, okay? So try not to judge me too harshly and let's get going. So we're talking about weathering first. And remember, weathering is changes in the appearance of the Earth's surface, okay? Specifically, weathering is the breaking down of rock by wind, water, ice, even plants and people, okay? Weathering is the breaking down of rock. So I want you guys to remember the word weathering starts with a W, and I want you to make a W with your fingers. Make a W with your fingers. I know you're watching this video, but just do it, okay? Make a W with your fingers, and remember that this means weathering, and weathering is the breaking down of rock and earth material. So when things weather, they break. I want you to break your W's. When they weather, they break, okay? So this can happen in different ways. So let's look through some of those examples now. First, we've got chemical weathering. Now, this is the process of the breaking away of rock and earth material through a chemical process. Okay, examples could be acid rainfall, which caused the rock to break down or weather. Another example could be if you see a new color forming in the rock. Think back to chemistry. And I know you covered this in sixth grade chemistry, but perhaps you covered it in other grades as well, that a sign of chemical change is when an object changes colors. Remember, like rust, okay? So if we have a new color or a flaky material all over the rock, then there's evidence of a chemical change weathering that rock. So lichens and other plants can use some of the minerals from a rock as nutrients. To use the rock for nutrients, these plants produce an acid that's going to dissolve away or break and weather away the rock. This acid, of course, is an indication that there's a chemical present and that there's chemical weathering or breaking down of that rock, okay? Next, we've got mechanical weathering. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying physical weathering, okay? Just like in chemistry, we have chemical changes and we have physical changes, right? So mechanical weathering is just physical weathering. So physical changing of the rock would be another example of weathering, or when the rock breaks. It is when the rock is broken down or weathered away from ice or maybe flowing water that is just chipping away at that rock, even roots or plants that are growing into the earth that would break that rock away. This would be physical or mechanical weathering. You would also have winds. Even light winds can break down rock over time. Plants and animals can break down the ground while they're burrowing, or the roots of a plant are spreading. Big powerful waves that are pushing up against the coastline can slowly over time chip away at that rock and break it, weather it, okay? You guys know that glaciers are heavy, huge, heavy moving pieces of rock, and slowly it can break down the rocks that are surrounding it, okay? Remember, weather and break. So this is physical changes. Rock is still rock, right? We haven't created anything new. It's just broken down into smaller pieces. And this would be an example of mechanical weathering or physical weathering, okay? Next, we've got erosion. Now, guys, I gave you a warning at the beginning of this video. I teach this in a silly way, so just bear with me, okay? So we've got erosion, and erosion is the movement of rock by wind, water, ice, even plants and people, okay? See this little guy who's dancing here in the corner? He's doing this sprinkler, okay? So we've got the movement, erosion, move it, erosion, move it, okay? So think about erosion as moving the things that have just been broken down. So weathering is when rock and earth material break, and then erosion is when those broken pieces move it, move it. Move it, move it. Oh, I know. I'm so embarrassing. But I promise you are going to remember it now that I've made a goober out of myself, okay? So I've embarrassed myself. I promise it'll be committed to your memory now. So remember that erosion is the movement of rock, wind, and water. Even plants and people can cause this to happen, okay? So weathering and erosion are what happens to create these kinds of landforms here. So let's take a closer look at erosion and how it happens, okay? So here we've got a graphic. We're going to make some observations. Now this graphic, if you saw up here in the corner, it started in the 1980s, and we're going to see over a period of time that the river and its shape starts to change. And it looks to be a new part of the river starts to kind of cut through in this area. You see it there, okay? And what was once there is now completely gone. Over here starts to completely disappear. Why do you think this might happen? Well, we talked about weathering last time, and we know that if a river is flowing, the water brushing against it is starting to weather it away, okay? Slowly brushing against the river bank, the water is going to slowly start breaking off pieces of that river bank and wash them away through erosion when they move, okay? So what happens is when the river starts picking up these sediments and moving them to another place, slowly over time, it's going to create what we call kind of an oxbow. You see how at the beginning of this river, we've got two kind of river curves here, and then these oxbow are what happens when these kind of humps start to collide as they are now. And then a new piece of river starts running through, okay? And then what was once there is then filled in by new earth material when those sediments are deposited or through deposition when they settle down to create new earth or new land, okay? Let's take a look at this in another way, in a picture that's not moving quite as much, okay? So here we have a river that has created a U-shaped pattern, okay? Now over periods of time, long periods of time, we're going to start seeing that the river is breaking away. So here we've got the red is where we're going to start chipping away. As this river flows, as it bumps into this riverbank here, it's going to start chipping away at this riverbank. And then it's going to come this way, and it's going to chip away here, and it's going to keep flowing. And every time it changes directions, it's going to start chipping away more at each turn, okay? Now, when it chips away at each turn, all of that sediment that is broken off and moved has to go somewhere. And usually it doesn't fall too far away. It can start filling in these areas here and building up. Over time, we've chipped away further at this kind of elbow, and we've chipped away further here, and now eventually these two things are going to collide and create one straight river, and then the sediments that have been broken off and deposited elsewhere are going to settle in between these things. Okay, so they'll settle here and they'll settle here. Now, this is what erosion might look like in terms of lakes and rivers, okay? I want you guys to apply these concepts elsewhere. Where else do you think rock and earth material could be weathered, eroded, and then deposited elsewhere to create new land? I want you guys to think about this as you go through the lesson and reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.